once the framers drafted the Constitution, they still had to get the various states to agree to it. So through some legal maneuvering, they got it so that only 9 out of the 13 states actually had to approve it for it to become law. The problem was, even if 9 out of the 13 did approve it, if we didn't have the larger, more populous states in there, like New York and Virginia, it wasn't really going to matter. Because if those populous states didn't want to go along with it, was it really going to work? So the Federalists, led by Hamilton, and also including John Jay and James Madison, wrote papers, basically sort of like op-eds, to convince the New York state government to ratify the Constitution. By the time these papers were written, the Constitution was actually ratified by enough states to become law. However, again, without New York coming on board, we weren't sure it was really going to work. So they wanted to make sure New York got on board. And they wrote a collection of papers to do that. Now, what these papers do for us sort of provide us with insight into what these 3 men were thinking. And we know that these 3 men were fundamental in drafting the Constitution. So what they were thinking really does matter. Now, when they wrote these papers, they were originally going to divide the work 3 ways, each of them with sort of equal responsibility. John Jay ended up only writing 5. Madison wrote 29 and Hamilton wrote the other 51. Now, Hamilton, which I've quoted this quote is from that, makes that sound like a major accomplishment, and it was, clearly. But most of what we hear when we talk about the Federalist Papers is actually from Madison's papers. Federalist 10, for example, which is one of the more famous papers, was written by Madison. And this paper talks about the principle of pluralism, what he calls the size principle. This idea that factions or tyranny of the majority can be dangerous. We've eliminated tyranny of the minority, right, a ruler, by creating a representative democracy. But how do we stop a majority rule system from just having a majority become tyrannical? And Madison said, well, we have a lot of different opinions in this country. There isn't going to be just one majority opinion at all moments. It's a big enough, diverse enough country that that's not going to happen. So he said that if we can't eliminate factions, because that is not going to be doable in a democracy, then we just have to mitigate their effects by having a pluralistic country with a lot of different opinions. Now, Madison also wrote the famous Federalist 51, which sort of got into more detail. The Federalist 10 is quite theoretical. Federalist 51 gives us some practical ways of actually mitigating the effects of factions. And the main idea here is he's explaining how the government will do that, how the system of checks and balances can help prevent any sort of tyranny. And he says that the government, everyone in government is going to be ambitious, right? The president's going to want to do a lot, but so is Congress and the court. So ambition can be made to check ambition. And that will keep everything in balance and stop any faction or individual from becoming tyrannical. So this form of government prevents a tyranny of the minority, which is what we experienced under British rule, where a king was ultimately in charge of everything. But it will also prevent a tyranny of the majority by giving minorities, right, like the president, like the court, right, minority groups in Congress even, power to check the ambition of the majority.